Amazing transformation. How one surprising kiss from a poor girl saved a billionaire's life. Thomas Mitchell stood in his penthouse office, a world of glass and steel, the New York skyline a glittering cage around him. Once it represented triumph. Now it felt like a cruel reminder of everything he'd forsaken: integrity, humility, family. Panic clawed at his throat like a ravenous beast. The disastrous deal he'd signed had unraveled more than his empire. It shattered the vague admiration his children held for him. Their faces flashed in his mind, all the times they'd looked at him with pride, now replaced by indifference. He hesitated, struggling with the weight of his choices. He needed to escape before the anger from the boardroom seeped into his bones, so he took to the streets, each step feeling heavier than the last. Brooklyn called to him, a city of grit and heart. The diner, with its flickering neon sign, brimmed with laughter and warmth, as if inviting him to remember what it meant to feel human again. He pushed through the door, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee enveloped him like an old friend. For some reason, the chaos of this humble diner felt safer than his sterile world of luxury. It was there that he met Emily, a waitress with dreams vibrant enough to paint the drab walls. Her spirit danced as she spoke of becoming a nurse, her laughter infectious even in the heart of chaos. Thomas found himself wanting to believe in her aspirations, wanting to share in her uncomplicated joy. As they shared a late-night coffee, he felt something thaw inside him. The burdens he'd carried began to seep out in fragments. His disappointments in the boardroom, the gnawing fear of irrelevance, the gnawing loneliness as his family drifted away. But just as he began to surface from the abyss, a text buzzed on his phone. A reminder of his waning health. Stress was tearing through him like a wildfire. How could he shake the gravity of his failures when he was, quite literally, falling apart? This was not the life he'd envisioned, and the walls of his carefully curated world felt like they were closing in. The jubilation of the diner faded, replaced by an insidious dread. What did it mean to have everything but be utterly alone? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The moment hung heavily between them, thick with unspoken words. As Emily leaned in, her lips brushed against his, and electrifying jolt that shocked the chaos from his mind. In that quiet diner booth, under the glare of flickering neon, something broke within him. His heart, dormant and encased in polished armor, began to ache with a purpose he thought lost. The kiss felt like a promise, awakening a buried desire to reclaim the values he'd lost. This spark propelled thoughts of his family, the shame he felt for pursuing wealth over connection. But doubt crept back instantly. Could he really change? Was transformation even possible for someone like him? As he fought against the tide of his past, it became clear: breaking free wouldn't be easy. The board had already marked him as a failure, and his family's skepticism loomed like a guillotine. The stakes were steep. Could a single gesture be enough to rewrite an entire legacy? The question hung in the air, pregnant with uncertainty, as waves of anguish crashed over him, threatening to drown any hope he held. Thomas stumbled back into the reality of his penthouse, a reluctant shell of the man he used to be. The walls that loomed over him now felt less like a fortress and more like a tomb. The kiss from Emily burned in his memory, a lasting echo that urged him to rediscover the fabric of his true self. Questions ricocheted through his mind. What if there was another way to live? What if he could rekindle the values he had long discarded for the cold embrace of corporate power? Yet this was New York, an unforgiving city where every misstep felt magnified. The looming board meeting was only days away, and he could already envision the judgment in his colleagues' eyes. Would they see a man desperate for redemption or a broken titan clinging to false hope? Clenching his fist, he vowed that the upcoming meeting wouldn't be just another charade. It would be his opportunity to lay bare his vulnerabilities. As he paced, each step resonated with resolve. He dialed his assistant, Sarah, who had been loyal through the chaos. "I need everything we have on the last deal," he demanded, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "And I want to publicly address our failures. Prepare a speech." "Just to clarify, the board," she began, but he cut her off. "I don't care what they think, Sarah. This time, it's about doing what's right, not just what's expected." Discomfort charged the atmosphere as he prepared to unveil the company's missteps in front of the very board members who cast doubt on his authority. He was acutely aware this could cost him dearly, but for the first time, he felt alive, a burgeoning sense of agency in the narrative of his life. He refused to be just another statistic of failure. He had an inner fire fueled not by wealth, but by the values he had once cherished. As the days ticked by, memories of his children haunted him more vividly than before. He envisioned their faces, once beacons of admiration, now shadows of disappointment. With each preparation, the reality of loss became palpable, a wound that had yet to heal. He felt compelled to reach out to them, to embrace the challenge of rebuilding their fractured bond. He initiated family dinners, awkward at first, the silence thick with the weight of unspoken grievances. However, he pressed forward, exchanging confessions with them over cascading plates of pasta. It was uncomfortable, yet exhilarating. They saw glimpses of the father they had missed, the man too consumed by ambition to notice their plight. Emily's empathy lingered in his thoughts. Had her presence catalyzed this transformation? She believed in him when he could barely fathom hope himself. The thought of failure loomed large, yet the memory of her smile kindled his determination. Perhaps this was the key to evolving, a blend of authenticity, vulnerability, and honest endeavor. Yet, stepping so far out of the shadows stirred profound anxiety. What if the board met his honesty with antagonism? What if they viewed his newfound clarity as a sign of weakness? The weight of that uncertainty threatened to crash down, yet he steeled himself. He understood now that the real failure would dwell in reluctance to confront the darkness. With each passing moment, he approached the inevitable confrontation, a reckoning that would unveil the raw underbelly of his choices. He would speak not just of failure, but of a future steeped in hope, ready to reclaim his legacy. But as the hour approached, deep within him a more profound fear burgeoned. Was he prepared to face the unyielding backlash? The clock ticked down to the boardroom meeting, and he inhaled deeply, pushing doubt aside. It was now or never, the moment to rise or fall, to fight or surrender. Little did he know, the answers awaited him not just among the board members, but also from within the depths of his newly exposed heart. What lay on the horizon would reshape not only his corporate destiny, but the course of his family's future. And so he stood at a precipice, a mix of trepidation and fierce resolve, ready to unveil the truth not only about the company, but perhaps about himself as well. The boardroom was a kaleidoscope of sharp suits and impenetrable expressions, each face a mask of skepticism or silent disdain. As Thomas entered, the air thickened with expectations that pressed heavily on his shoulders. This was not just a meeting, it was the battleground for his values, his aspirations, and perhaps even his redemption. He took his seat at the head of the elongated table, feeling the cold touch of the polished surface beneath his palms. The board members shuffled papers, their eyes narrowing in anticipation but void of sympathy. He caught sight of Sarah exiting with a nod, a fleeting sense of reassurance against the rising tide of dread. He had every intention to dismantle the polished facades, the corporate jargon, the insincere nods, the numbing silence after failures. As he stood to speak, his heart thudded fiercely within his chest. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady but softer than he intended. "I want to discuss the challenges we faced in the last quarter." He paused, searching for grounding in the sea of critical gazes. "Our last deal was a failure, and we have to own that." The air crackled with surprise. A board member's brow furrowed at his directness, the uncharacteristic transparency threatening their preconceived notions of corporate bravery. But he pressed on, each word becoming more fluid as he unearthed his truths, sharing not just statistics, but the fallout of decisions made in pursuit of profit over principle. He revealed the cracks, the sleepless nights, and the ghosts of his children's disappointed faces that haunted his reflections. Then came the moment of confrontation. A senior board member rose, his voice dripping with condescension. "Thomas, this is a corporate setting. We don't air our dirty laundry for everyone to see. It is naive." "Naive?" Thomas interrupted, his pulse quickening. The room fell silent, eyes darting between him and the critic. "What's naive is pretending our failures don't impact real lives, real families. My children deserve a father, not just a financial provider." His declaration hung in the air, morphing from vulnerable confession to battle call. There, in that instant, he wrestled with his internal conflict. Would they see his struggle as weakness, or as the strength to face his flaws? Perhaps it was too late for their understanding, yet something shifted in him. The weight of years of corporate ambition crushed beneath the authenticity of his plight. The tension rippled through the room, leaving some board members visibly stirred, perhaps rethinking their metrics of success. For every sarcastic scoff, there echoed the muffled understanding of a few who had tasted the bitterness of failure themselves. Understanding him not just as a troubled CEO, but as a man unshackling himself from a gilded cage. As the meeting progressed, he felt emboldened by a new realization. The honesty that pierced through his vulnerability sparked a courageous flame within. He made a decision to dig deeper, to align himself not only with corporate recovery, but also with his own emotional restoration. Once the meeting adjourned, Thomas could feel the energy shift. Some board members approached him cautiously, a mix of astonishment and newfound respect straining their stiff spines. Discussion shifted from his failures to paths of innovation, into ways of renewal for both the company and his own life. But as he left the boardroom, remnants of doubt gnawed at his resolve. Would this newfound clarity last, or would it slip through his fingers like grains of sand? The familiar grip of anxiety wrapped around him as he stepped back into the bustling streets outside, the city's pulse reverberating in tandem with his own. He couldn't shake the memories of his children, still vivid, their laughter intertwined with the sorrow of lost time. And amid this reflection, there loomed the question: how far would he go to transform not just in business, but in the role of a father and a man? In that moment, standing frozen, Thomas realized that this was merely the beginning of his journey, a precursor to the real challenge. What he had to confront next would be far closer to home, a reckoning with his children, a deeper unveiling of his responsibilities as their father. With determination now fueling him, he turned toward his next move. He had faced the board. Now it was time to face the ones whose hearts he had all but abandoned. The walls he had built may have begun to crack, but the journey toward true redemption was far more intricate than he had imagined. And as he took his first steps towards home, he felt a mix of nervous anticipation and fragile hope swirling inside him. Would his children grant him forgiveness, Or was this flame poised to extinguish before it truly ignited? The late afternoon sun dipped below the skyline, casting long shadows that mirrored Thomas's internal turmoil as he approached his front door. The facade of the house they had chosen together felt like a beacon of memories, joyful moments entwined with deep regrets. Each step echoed with uncertain fervor, amplifying the weight of his crumbling confidence. What would he say? How could he bridge the chasm he'd created with his children? As he hesitated at the threshold, he recalled the last time they had been together as a family. Their laughter had been vibrant, untainted by his constant absences. Now silence enveloped the house, a poignant reminder of what he had chosen over them. He felt an urge to push past the door and flee back into the chaos of the city, where he could drown in meetings and decisions that had nothing to do with his heart. But there was no escaping this. This was his true battlefield. With a deep breath, he crossed the threshold, the familiar smell of home wrapping around him like a blanket, warm yet suffocating. Both Sarah and the kids, Mira and Lucas, were gathered in the living room, flickering light from the television casting a glow over their faces. In that moment, he saw not just their physical being, but also the void of connection, like strangers inhabiting the same space. "Dad!" Mira exclaimed, surprise replacing her initial gaze of indifference. Lucas remained on the couch, his fingers glued to a gaming console, pretending not to notice his father's return. "Hey, kiddos," Thomas said, attempting a casual tone that crumbled as he spoke. He moved further in, the initial warmth of their greetings soon clouded by unarticulated feelings. Their faces showed both caution and expectation, as if they were waiting for him to reveal the hidden treasures of his heart. "Did you have a good day?" Sarah asked, her voice steady but edged with concern. "I did. I actually had some important conversations today." Silence filled the room, and he could almost hear the unasked
Important conversations about what? About them? About life? About being a dad? He hesitated because he realized the most pivotal conversation belonged not in the boardroom, but here, at home, where it mattered most. "Before we talk about my day, can we just talk?" The moment he uttered those words, he felt a shift in the air, a slight crack in their collective apprehension. Mira, ever the sensitive one, lowered her game controller and looked up at him, curiosity edged with bravery. About what? About me. About us. About everything. What I've been doing and how it's affected you both. This was not just sharing information. It was a necessary reckoning, one that laid bare his frailties and failures as a father. His heart raced as he caught both of their gazes, the weight of vulnerability pressing down on him with a new urgency. "I've let you down. I've been so consumed by work that I forgot to be present for you, and I'm really sorry." Mira's brow furrowed. "You've missed all my recitals, and Lucas, he needs you to teach him how to ride a bike." Lucas's fingers finally relaxed around the controller, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, we used to do stuff like that." The words stung like cold water, each revelation a reminder of the countless moments he had forfeited. Thomas felt the urge to rationalize, to explain away his choices, but deep down, he understood there was no justification for the distance he had built. He wanted to reach out, to hold them both, but fear of rejection held him back. Instead, he took a breath and ventured cautiously. "What if we started fresh? Together? Would you let me be a part of your lives again?" The incredulity on their faces reflected his own doubts. Could they truly forgive the years of absence, or was the bridge to rebuild too daunting to scale? Mira exchanged glances with Lucas before slowly nodding. "We could try," she said, almost tentatively. But the hesitation lingered in the air, as if their hearts were shielded by the walls of his past actions. As hope flickered after the pang of honesty, He realized this was not just a conversation. It was the first step towards reconstructing the foundation of his identity. The transformation awaited not within walls of executive offices, but in the embrace of his children's evolving acceptance. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, the specters of his past choices looming. But for the first time in a long while, Thomas felt ignited by a sense of purpose greater than any corporate ambition. Turning to Sarah, he attempted to meet her gaze, learning to address this new dynamic as well. "I want us all to work through this." But just as Sarah opened her mouth to respond, the doorbell rang sharply, disrupting the fragile moment. Thomas felt his heartbeat quicken. Could this be another obstacle, or perhaps an unexpected opportunity? He took a step
Toward the door, the swirl of emotions in the air merging with an unsettling, eerie anticipation. Would the unexpected visitor further illuminate his path, or rub salt into unresolved wounds? The moment had shifted, and he was poised on the brink of a new chapter. As Thomas reached the door, his grip tightened around the handle, a peculiar mix of dread and curiosity bubbling within him. The ringing persisted, each chime resonating with propelled urgency. He glanced back at Sarah, who wore an expression of tentative hope, and at Mira and Lucas, still huddled together, their faces a mixture of expectation and concern. Taking a breath that felt like a declaration of intent, he swung the door open, to reveal a figure that jolted his heart into motion. It was Paul, his estranged colleague from years past, the last person he expected to see. Paul looked somewhat disheveled, but had a determined gleam in his eye that made Thomas stand a little straighter, adjust his posture. "Tom," Paul said, a blend of relief and hesitation in his voice, "I've been trying to reach you. I hope I'm not interrupting anything crucial." The words hung heavy in the air, as if the universe was conspiring to inject chaos into this fragile reconciliation moment. "No, not at all," Thomas replied, a false lightness creeping into his tone. I was just talking with my kids." "Good to see them," Paul said, glancing inside. His expression shifted with recognition. "Hey, Mira, Lucas." Thomas felt the weight of scrutiny as his children peered at Paul with a mix of confusion and wariness. This was not the ideal introduction to a long-absent father's quest for redemption. "What's going on, Paul?" he urged, trying to bring focus back to the conversation, brushing aside the dissonance swirling around them. "I need your help," Paul started, his voice lowering, drawing Thomas's full attention. "There's a project I'm involved with at the firm, and we're at a critical juncture. I know your skill set is unmatched, and I could really use—" "Wait, now? You need my help now?" Thomas interrupted, the irritable edge creeping into his voice. "I'm trying to make amends with my family. I can't jump back into that life, Paul, not right now." Paul's eyes narrowed, sensing the change in ambiance. "I understand that, Tom, but this isn't just about work. It's about something bigger, something I think you'd care about. It involves opportunities, financially, ethically." Thomas's frustration boiled over momentarily. "Couldn't you have reached out earlier? Could you not have seen the absolute mess I'm in? I can't even be a decent father right now. Why should I care about another corporate opportunity?" He felt like a gaping wound, the unresolved insecurities and ambitions in constant conflict. Never had he envisioned that this moment, a reunion with his kids, when he was confronting his failures, would be disrupted by the very world he was attempting to escape. "Because it's not just about you," Paul snapped, the rawness edging. "This project could save lives, real lives, Tom." A moment of silence hung between them, and Thomas felt an internal schism deepen. Who was he now, father or businessman? Did he have the capacity to balance both identities? Or was this an opportunity to dive headfirst into another race he was destined to lose? As he battled with these thoughts, he heard Sarah's soft voice pull him back. "Do what you think is right, Tom." The assurance in her words hung in the air, enriching the decision that loomed.
Caught in the wake of their interests, Thomas realized he hadn't just concealed himself behind corporate ambitions. He had buried any chance of being the husband and father he yearned to become. The tension in him simmered. Another attempt to navigate this duality was needed. Stepping outside, Thomas faced Paul, each standing on the precipice of their personal narratives. "You want my help?" he asked, the weight of choice pressing heavily on his shoulders. "Then let's talk. But this time, it needs to matter in every sense, not just for profit, but for something that connects beyond the office walls." As they stepped away from his home, Thomas realized he hadn't just concealed himself behind corporate ambitions. He had buried any chance of being the husband and father he yearned to become. The tension in him simmered. Another attempt to navigate this duality was needed. Stepping outside, Thomas faced Paul, each standing on the precipice of their personal narratives. "You want my help?" he asked, the weight of choice pressing heavily on his shoulders. "Then let's talk. But this time, it needs to matter in every sense, not just for profit, but for something that connects beyond the office walls." As they stepped away from his home, Thomas felt the unusual thrill of reclaiming his agency. But with that excitement came a pit of uncertainty. This was no longer just a familial healing. It had become a pivotal junction where professional ties crossed dangerously with personal growth. Now, at this crossroads, what path would he choose to tread? Would he immerse himself again in the corporate abyss, risking the tentative bond he was beginning to forge with his family? Or transform this moment into a turning point for true self-discovery? Finding resolve will not come easy, and as he caught a glance back at his children's expectant faces, Thomas understood. This was only the beginning of the journey ahead, the first step into uncharted territory on both personal and professional fronts. Each choice would reverberate through not just his life, but the lives of those he held dearest. The stakes were only rising, and the urgency of change loomed larger than ever. What lay ahead would demand more than just presence. It required him to redefine who he truly was. Before he could step away, Paul spoke again, drawing him back from his reverie. "So, shall we dive in?" And with that, the door to both torment and transformation swung wide open, leaving Thomas wondering if this time he could truly emerge without losing everything he had started to reconnect. The city felt different under the fading light, shadows looming like whispers of uncertainty as Thomas walked alongside Paul. Their footsteps echoed against the pavement as they made their way to Paul's car, an inconspicuous sedan that contrasted sharply with the high-stakes world Thomas had once inhabited. Memories of boardrooms and late-night deadlines flashed through Thomas's mind, interwoven with his recent struggle for familial connection. "Are you sure about this?" Paul asked, casting a sidelong glance, the question a subtle probe into Thomas's resolve. "Maybe sure isn't the right word," he replied, his voice low. It was easy to slip back into that old rhythm, to feel the tug of ambition and the adrenaline of competing. But beneath that surface, a new foundation was slowly forming, one built on his role as a father and husband. Paul opened the door, revealing the worn interior of the car. As they settled in, the tension coiling between them morphed fluidly into a shared focus. "Look, Tom, I know this isn't an easy ask, but the project isn't just a project. It's a potential game-changer," Paul began, unfolding a dossier from beneath the seat, its contents concealed from the waning daylight. "We're working on sustainable housing solutions for low-income families. The impact could be monumental." Thomas's heart danced uneasily. A flicker of hope ignited as he considered the possibilities of making a real difference, to contribute something that actually mattered. But could he? "I'm not just a resource for your project. I have to be there for my kids," he countered, a mildly defensive edge creeping into his tone. "I get it, I really do," Paul replied.
the sincerity evident in his voice. But think about the example you'd set. Being present in their lives isn't exclusive to standing on the sidelines. This can show them how to engage with the world, how to contribute. The words struck a chord deep within him, reverberating with the very conflict he grappled with. This was an opportunity for engagement, not just with work, but with his ideals. Could he guide his children through asking them to look outward rather than retreating inward? A quiet moment passed as they navigated through the city, the sounds of honking horns and distant chatter filling the gaps. Inside, he wrestled with the whisper of ambition, trying to intertwine with the voice of responsibility. It was a profound moment of reckoning. Could he truly become someone who pursued both personal fulfillment and ethical responsibility? "Let's say I consider this," he said, his mind whirring with the ramifications of his decision. "What's the plan? How do we even start?" Paul's face brightened, the urgency within him surfacing with renewed vigor. "We'll meet with stakeholders, including community leaders and potential investors. It's crucial to bring everyone on board to ensure the project aligns with their needs. And if we do this right, we might secure the funding to make a real difference." As Thomas listened, he felt the familiar thrum of potential racing through him, a sensation that had been absent for too long. This was less about returning to his old life and more about crafting a new one that resonated with his rediscovered purpose. "However, I'm not picking this up without support," Thomas added, newfound resolve firming his words. "We need to include families in this conversation. I won't enable a project that overlooks the very people it aims to help. If I accept, everything must reflect integrity." "Absolutely," Paul agreed, nodding vigorously. "That's what we need, your insight. You understand the corporate world, and you have the heart to ensure we're doing this right." The route ahead shifted as their conversation flourished. With every mile, Thomas embraced that he was not just making a decision for himself, but for a greater legacy, one that would envelop his family instead of isolating them. If he verged down this path, it might finally bridge the gaps he had let fester for years. As they approached their destination, a modest conference center standing proudly against the skyline, the weight of what lay ahead intensified. Soon, he would face not just professional challenges, but also confront the fear of slipping back into his old self. Yet, he could not ignore the burgeoning recognition dawning inside him, that maybe this amalgamation of familial duty and professional ambition was the profound transformation he had been seeking. Emerging from the car, Thomas steadied himself, a resolute aura beginning to surround him. But before he could step inside, a nagging thought crept back into his mind. Could he sustain this balance? Would the price of ambition sever the very bonds he was striving to mend? With the taste of uncertainty clinging to his thoughts, he stepped forward into the fray, committed to, at last, forge an identity that represented both his past failures and the bright potential of the future he yearned for. In that moment, he chose to reclaim his narrative. But as he entered the dimly lit arena of stakeholders, he braced himself for the unavoidable conflicts that would await him. Would his commitment hold fast against the sheer weight of ambition? The conference room was alive with energy, yet for Thomas it felt like stepping back onto a battlefield. The circular table, polished and intimidating, mirrored the weight in his chest. Stakeholders were exchanging pleasantries, their laughter sounding distant while his mind simmered in introspection. He had arrived here to negotiate not only a project, but also his place within it, an unsettling yet necessary confrontation with the ambitions that once defined him. As introductions swirled around him, Thomas's focus narrowed. The conference was a mixed bag of local leaders, investors eager for long-term gains, and policy advocates holding on to lofty ideals. Each face was a potential roadmap illuminating paths he could take or pitfalls he might avoid. He was acutely aware that navigating this landscape meant more than just business acumen. It required soul-searching integrity that he had only recently begun to embrace. "Let's get started, shall we?" Paul's voice sliced through his musings. The room quieted and the spotlight shifted onto the projector screen, illuminating graphs, figures, and plans. It was a compelling vision, laying out the benefits of their sustainable housing initiative, yet Thomas felt an underlying current of anxiety. While it painted a promising future, could he ensure that it wouldn't just become another corporate scheme? An idea began to form. It morphed from a mere inkling into a fully fleshed out concept in his mind. As he weighed the significance of his contributions, he realized he needed to emphasize collaboration, genuine collaboration. "I believe we should incorporate surveys or focus groups composed of the families we aim to help," he interjected, the words surprising even him. "We must understand their needs and aspirations directly. This isn't just about what we think will work, we need their voices at the core of our strategy." Paul shot him a glance, a mix of surprise and pride lighting up his expression. Across the room, nods of approval passed from the advocates to the investors, and for the first time since entering, Thomas felt a flicker of empowerment. This was the balance he sought, not merely being involved, but ensuring that every decision resonated with authenticity and purpose. Yet, such candor came at a cost. Almost immediately, a voice from the investment side spoke up, skepticism lacing his tone. "If we spend time engaging with families, we delay execution. Investors need certainty, not ambiguity." The challenge was overt, yet Thomas felt a spark of determination ignite within him. This was the moment he had spoken about, where ambition met societal responsibility. He straightened, feeling the weight shift. Delays can be a risk, but I'd argue that misaligned visions lead to far greater consequences, both morally and financially. If we fail to understand the community, we jeopardize this investment. What kind of return do we expect, and at what cost? Silence enveloped the room, a silence thick with contemplation. The investors' faces showed signs of discomfort. They appeared to weigh his words heavy against their preconceived notions of success. As discussions ignited, Thomas's mind raced with revelations. This was a critical moment, not just for the project, but for him. He was not only carving out a new professional identity, but also protecting the values he wished to impart to his children. The more he engaged with these stakeholders, the more he recognized the profound influence one voice could have when echoed through integrity and intent. Paul leaned in, visibly impressed. "Think about it, Tom. You're not just advocating for a project, you're leading a movement to reshape how we think about community investments. There's real potential here." Thomas felt his resolve strengthen. This was more than a job or a financial opportunity. It was a chance to lead by example, to impart new values to both his professional network and his family. But beneath the growing excitement lay an undercurrent of uncertainty. Would he retain this momentum, or could the demands of ambition erode his responses? The meeting concluded with tentative agreements and action items, yet as the participants mingled and departed, the thrill of possibility was overshadowed by the looming question: could he maintain this trajectory of integrity, or would the very ambition he nurtured risk turning the project into another hollow victory? As he stepped back into the fading light of the evening, resolve began to flicker within him once more, but the shadows of doubt lingered. Would he be able to meld the world's financial expectations of the investors, but also resonate deeply with the community's needs? Once in the office, he faced an array of emails, reports, and messages, each competing for his attention. Still, his heart thrummed with intent. He decided to tackle his priorities with a clear purpose, starting to draft a plan that not only included structural designs, but community engagement frameworks. There was no room for half measures. He knew this project could be a pivotal moment in shaping a model of investing centered around genuine understanding. But doubt began to creep back in as he worked late into the night. What if the investors were right? What if engaging with the community would derail the project, leaving him exposed, vulnerable to scrutiny? Determined to push through his unease, he scheduled meetings with community leaders that would allow him to gather insights directly from the potential occupants.
As he pressed the send button on his invitation, he felt the weight of fear carefully balanced with the possibility of meaningful change. Trepidation rolled over him like a wave as he prepared for what lay ahead. Could he effectively unify differing opinions while remaining loyal to his newfound values? Would he falter when confronted by stakeholders with a singular focus on profits? His confidence was still fragile, but it was hardening into something unyielding. As he turned off his computer for the night, he received a message from Paul expressing enthusiasm for Thomas's recent propositions. Encouraged, but aware of the road bumps ahead, Thomas felt resolve blossom within him, yet an encroaching thought lingered. The forthcoming meetings with community leaders would require more than idealism. Could he truly embody the leadership he envisioned? In the silence of his home, as he again embraced the warmth of family life, that same unsettling question returned to haunt him. Would the ambitions he pursued for his work ultimately serve as a bridge or a barrier to the life he desired for his family? In that moment of pause, he realized the journey to self-awareness was only just beginning, and he was ready to confront what lay on the other side. As the sun rose the next day, Thomas felt an unusual mix of dread and determination. Today marked the first of several pivotal meetings with community leaders, and the anticipation swirled within him like a tornado. What exactly was he going to address? What if they challenged him? He spent his morning rehearsing in front of the mirror, a tactician gearing up for battle. Every answer he prepared felt tethered to his newfound values of collaboration and empathy, yet the nagging doubt, was he displaying weakness or authenticity? Arriving at the community center, Thomas surveyed the room filled with faces that were both hopeful and skeptical. Their expressions painted a mosaic of expectations, and he could feel the gravitational pull of his own insecurities. Would he meet their desires or simply regurgitate corporate jargon? He grimaced at the thought. As the meeting commenced, conversations flowed. A chaotic blend of disparate opinions. Leaders spoke passionately about their hopes for the development, and Thomas listened intently, nodding along. Yet, even as he absorbed their words, the fear lurked. What if he could not appease everyone's varied dreams? Finally, he steeled himself to respond. I want to ensure that our project truly mirrors your vision. It's not just about building houses. We aim to create homes, spaces where families can thrive. I'm here to understand what you as a community truly need. A murmur of surprise rippled through the room, but a voice pierced through the tension. And what if your investors don't agree with that vision? It was a challenge, a confrontation that hit him hard. I believe sustainability resides in mutual understanding, Thomas countered, rallying the courage he had been cultivating. Short-term profits can't outweigh the long-term relationships we build with the community. Some nodded, while others looked doubtful. The discussion morphed from cordial to contentious, and old doubts flickered in his mind. What if his vision failed to impress the investors? The pivot boiled in his gut, yet he recognized the crossroads he faced, a choice between immediate acceptance or risk-laden authenticity. Moments stretched as he gauged the room. Tension coiled around him. Then he thought of his daughter's school project, the harmony they'd sought despite the differences. Let's imagine the outcome together, he proposed. What does success look like for you? His question catalyzed a shift. One leader, visibly moved, shared their vision for communal gardens, places where neighbors could meet and build relationships. As ideas flowed, Thomas diligently documented their dreams, building an invisible thread of connection that transcended profit margins. With each shared hope, he felt fortified, witnessing the transformative power of collaboration. When at last he left, the pride swelling inside was surprising. Though shadows of uncertainty lingered, Thomas recognized a burgeoning sense of clarity. The meeting had not fully quelled the fear of dissent, but he had found his place amidst discord, a voice advocating for harmony and understanding. Later, as he shared reflections with his family over dinner, his children sensed the change within.
"You seem different, Dad," his son remarked, a question of curiosity glimmering in his eyes. "I feel different," Thomas admitted. "I am learning the importance of listening, of connecting." But as he lay in bed that night, unease settled in. Could he further champion this approach without losing sight of corporate goals? The weight of this personal development, coupled with professional ambition, raised the stakes. The moment of reckoning was approaching. If he failed to find the balance, not only would he risk his career, but he may irrevocably alter the path of his family life as well. A hard truth loomed ahead. Blending ambition and authenticity demanded more than just idealistic dreams. It called for a fierce will to navigate through choppy waters. Tomorrow would be a new test, one that could possibly unveil the hidden fractures in his ideals. Would he rise or falter? The day of reckoning arrived with a tentative dawn, both bright and clouded with uncertainty as Thomas prepared to face the boardroom once more. After the breakthrough moments with the community leaders, he had come to realize that genuine connection required more than just empathy. It demanded courage to challenge the very fabric of corporate expectations. Today, he would need to confront not only the board's skepticism, but also truly solidify the vision of a sustainable project that balanced ambition with community integrity. As he stood in front of the mirror, the man staring back no longer appeared as the remnants of a once ruthless entrepreneur. Instead, he recognized a leader, one forged through vulnerability and purposeful intent. He had come to accept that highlighting the community's voice was not merely a moral cause, but a vision that could catalyze both structural and ethical innovation. This pivot demanded a sense of agency that felt invigorating. Arriving at the boardroom, the atmosphere was noticeably charged. The board members gathered around the long table, some with laptops open, others with stern expressions that spoke of indifference towards Thomas's previous presentations. Yet today, despite the steeliness of his colleagues, he felt an inner calm. He was armed with the knowledge that he was not just speaking for himself, but representing the hopes of families who deserved a stake in their future. "Thank you all for convening on such short notice," he began, confidence resonating in his voice. "Today, I want to present our next steps for the sustainable housing initiative we've discussed, but I also want to share something essential." He paused, gauging the board's reaction, their skeptical expressions predictably stony. "I met with community leaders. It became clear that if we wish to invest financially in their lives, we also need to invest emotionally and morally. Our project cannot merely provide shelter, it must cultivate an environment where families can flourish." Murmurs of discontent rippled through the room, but he pressed on. "I am asking for your support to integrate community involvement into our strategy. This means we need to embrace a model that allows families to actively participate in defining their future spaces." He felt the tidal weight of dissent wash over him as a voice broke through the mumbling. "And what guarantee do we have this will be profitable?" Let me counter with a question. What happens if we push forward without engaging their input? "Ultimately, we risk failure," he articulated, meeting the cynic's gaze head-on. In a time when corporations are being called to account for their societal impacts, we could position ourselves as a beacon, setting a new standard for ethical practice in real estate. The room fell quiet as Thomas pushed further, weaving his personal growth narrative into his corporate vision. "Look, I've learned through recent challenges. My failures as a father nearly cost me my family, as many of you know. This isn't just about profits. This is about legacy and responsibility." To his astonishment, the room shifted slightly. Conversations simmered down, and he could see some of the board shifting uneasily in their seats. When he concluded his presentation, the space held an unusual intensity, a contrast to the dismissal he had almost come to expect. Slowly, a head of finance began to speak. "You may not be wrong, Thomas," his tone cautiously considerate.
Engagement might yield better buy-in, but it carries risks. And for the first time, the dialogue transformed into a productive discussion about methodology, about potential execution. As the meeting brought in new voices of collaboration, Thomas seized the moment. That's exactly the inquiry I wish for us to explore together. We have an obligation to redefine our measure of success. Let's establish a feedback loop from the community, their dream homes, something we can quantify and qualify through real impact. By the end of the session, the board agreed to initiate a pilot program involving community meetings and steering committees. They recognized an opportunity to establish themselves as industry leaders in ethical real estate, and it felt as though the old barriers of skepticism were beginning to dissolve. Emerging from the boardroom, Thomas felt a wave of gratitude for the new connections forged, not only with his colleagues, but also within himself. There was an undeniable sense of redefined purpose, one that resonated deeply with his role as a father and a member of the community he now sought to uplift. Later that evening, the atmosphere at home was electrifying. His children sat amid paper and art supplies, their laughter echoing through the house. Thomas joined them, feeling the deep sense of connection that he had long neglected. Over dinner, he shared fragments of his day, sparking their intrigue. "Did you really change their minds?" Mira asked, eyes bright with admiration. "I did, but only by listening to others first," he admitted. "And I think it's just the beginning of a greater journey." As they continued their conversation, he noticed how effortlessly they bonded over shared values. Thomas recognized the power of practicing empathy, not just outside the home, but within it. That night, as he lay in bed, he felt profound contentment envelop him. The journey toward transformation, both in business and at home, had brought renewed life to the relationships he cherished most. Reflecting on the complex balancing act he had undertaken, trusting his leadership acumen while fostering emotional connections, meant his role as a father was on its own journey of growth. Tomorrow would continue to unveil fresh opportunities to challenge himself, but he embraced the uncertainty that lay ahead, confident in the conviction that he was weaving a narrative defined by both ambition and heart. Each choice, each interconnected moment was building toward a vision that stretched beyond simple success. This was a metamorphosis forged in the crucible of honest accountability, a new chapter in which he could triumph and truly emerge, forged anew, no longer just a wealthy businessman, but a devoted husband and father whose legacy would be rooted equally in love, compassion, and purposeful ambition. The path ahead would
demand persistence and grit, but Thomas now recognized that within those challenges lay the heart of both his personal and professional life, the beautiful, complex development of connection and contribution rising from it all. As he drifted off to sleep, hope and determination filled his dream, a testament to the journey he had just begun, with every step signaling not just his return to integrity, but a thriving new identity anchored in what it truly meant to succeed. You need to subscribe now to continue following this exclusive emotional journey of personal transformation. Leave a like now to support the algorithm that brings you these compelling stories. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Thomas's profound journey and the challenges still ahead. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness the power of true personal growth.